Mark Harper, the Transport Secretary, I hope joins me now. He's also the Conservative MP for the Forest of Dean. Mr Harper, I hope you can hear me. Thank you very much indeed for your morning. Thank you for your time this morning. Can I have your reaction, first of all, to this polling in the Mail on Sunday, basically predicting electoral calamity, a near extinction event for the Conservatives? Rishi Sunak's plan isn't working, is it, Mr Harper?
Well, look, I haven't seen the specifics of that polling, but look, the plan we've got is working. The Prime Minister set out a number of commitments. The first one was to drive down the level of inflation. We have absolutely done that, and it's now forecast to fall even further as we get the next few months. And the other commitment was on stopping the votes. And in fact, tomorrow in Parliament, Conservative MPs will have the opportunity to vote down all of the amendments passed in the House of Lords by Labour peers attempting to weaken that legislation, and we'll have the opportunity to make sure we can strengthen it again and give us the ability to get those flights off to Rwanda to break the back of the organised crime groups trafficking people over the channel.
When will those flights take off? What's your prediction, Mr Harper?
Well, look, we've got the legislation still to get through Parliament. We're at the tail end of that, so I hope that will be on the statute book very soon.
Approximate time frame?
The Home Office has been working very hard on... Well, the Home Office is working very hard on making sure we can act as soon as the legislation's there. So I would hope we'd be able to get those flights off the ground as soon as possible. I'm not going to pick an arbitrary date, but look, we've made a lot of progress already. We've reduced the number of people crossing the Channel by a third at a time when other European countries have seen a rapid rise. So we're absolutely delivering on that commitment. I think the public wants us to focus on delivering on commitments, not focusing on speculation in newspapers.
But you say that, but none of this is changing the situation for the Conservatives being so far behind Labour. None of this is moving the dial, as we say in the trade. We've now got talk in the newspapers about a leadership change again, such as the lack of confidence in Rishi Sunak being able to win the next general election, that there's now talk of Penny Mordaunt being brought in as yet another Tory leader.
Well, look, I'm concentrating on doing my job and focusing on making the right decisions for the country. That's also what the Prime Minister's doing, not focusing on stories in the newspapers. He's making the right long-term decisions for the country. The plan is delivering those results, and as we get through this year, he said at the beginning of this year it was his working assumption the election will be at the second half of the year. I'm confident the public will see that the economy is moving in the right direction, inflation is falling, they're getting real terms pay rises. We've been able to cut taxes in both the budget and the autumn statement. That delivers a £900 tax cut for ordinary working people on an average income, and I think people will recognise that and that we'll get the credit. You don't change these opinion polls overnight. It does take time for that to work through, but I think we've got time to do that. And then the election, of course, is a choice between a party like us that's got a plan that's working and a Labour Party that hasn't got a plan that would take us back to square one. And I think choice, I think the public will back us.
If Tory MPs don't have confidence in Rishi Sunak, you can't blame the public if they don't have confidence in the Prime Minister either. I mean, why are so many of these Conservatives so-called shy Conservatives? Why have I had Sir Ian Duncan-Smith, the former party leader, in the studio earlier talking about the fact that half of the electorate is undecided? The Conservatives hasn't done enough to convince them to vote for them. You haven't done enough to convince people to vote for you, Mr Harper. That's the problem. That's why you're also going to get annihilated in the May local elections, right?
Look, it's perfectly true that there is a record number of people at the moment who are undecided and don't know who they're going to vote for. So that is the opportunity for us. You're absolutely right. That group of voters who haven't yet decided what they're going to do, many of whom will have voted for us in 2019, we've got to show them by the time of the election two things. We've got to show them that we've got a plan, the plan is working and it's delivering for them, and I think we can see that it is on inflation and on taxes. We've also then got to show them that the Labour Party doesn't have a plan and will be a big risk. For example, we know the Labour Party wants to spend £28 billion on their green plan. They've hidden the price tag now, but they don't know how to pay for it. That would mean taxes going up.
To be fair, Jonathan Ashworth has just been on accusing you of having a £46 billion black hole in your own finances because of the pledge you're making over the next 5 years on national insurance cuts. So how are you going to fund those?
Well, look, that's nonsense. Well, look, that's nonsense. We've made it quite clear that we have an ambition to stop the double taxation of work, but we already have demonstrated, but we're only going to deliver that when the public finances allow, and we've just demonstrated both at the budget and at the autumn statement that we've been able to take 4% off of national insurance contributions. That's a third reduction, and we did that at the same time as we were investing in public services, increasing people's pensions, and investing extra money into the National Health Service. So we can do all of these things because we've made the right long-term decisions. So I think, frankly, Labour's line is just a load of scaremongering. It also shows, by the way, that they don't understand how the tax system works.
Well, having said that, the National Grid isn't scaremongering, is it, Mr Harper, when it says it's going to cost 60 billion at a Conservative estimate to decarbonise by 2035? So again, I had Ian Duncan-Smith in the studio earlier talking about the cost of the government's net zero pledges. I mean, the costs of this 60 billion at a bare minimum, it's going to cost the general public billions of pounds, isn't it?
Well, look, it's very important that we deliver on our climate change obligations. People can see that the climate is changing.
We are delivering on them, aren't we? We're delivering on them. We found out this week Britain's carbon emissions have fallen to their lowest level since 1879, yet it's not making any difference whatsoever to the world's temperature. Why are you sticking to this net zero target when we're doing so well on carbon emissions already?
Well, look, it is important that we reduce our carbon emissions for several reasons. Firstly, for the climate, because, by the way, the change in the climate also puts a huge cost on the public sector. For example, my area of transport, we're having to spend a significant amount of money to make both the rail network and the road network more resilient to the extreme weather events we're getting. That's a cost on the taxpayer, which we need to deal with. But secondly, it's also about making sure that we're no longer dependent on carbon sources of energy to stop us being dependent, for example, on having to buy fuel from countries like Russia, who use that to fuel their war machine. Actually, having more carbon-friendly sources of energy means we're more resilient, more protected from energy price hikes like the one we've seen over the last couple of years. So I think it's good for consumers. Yes, we do have to invest money in the National Grid, but I think that can be afforded in the usual way. The National Grid invests a lot of money in making sure it's resilient, and I think that's in the interest of consumers to make us much more independent, energy independent.
Obviously, there's this move to get people to drive electric vehicles. Currently, as it stands, Mr Harper, you're Transport Secretary, so you should know the answer to this. How many electric vehicle charging points are there in the UK?
So we've just driven up, well, it depends what you mean by charging points. Most people with an electric vehicle actually charge their vehicle at home.
Yes.
We're obviously going to need increasing numbers of charging points. We're going to need an increasing number of charging points publicly. We drove up the number of charging points in the last year by 43%. The charge point industry has about £6 billion worth of capital available to roll that over the next few years. So we're very confident that as the number of electric vehicles increases, and there are over 1 million on the roads already, there will be charge points both at motorway service areas and in local communities, as well as people charging home. Well, I don't know. Well, I don't know the precise number, but it increased by 43% last year. Well, I don't know, because it increased by 43% last year.
I know, but you know how many electric vehicles are on the road, so there's 1 million electric vehicles. Many people are saying they're struggling to find charging points. So how many are there and how many should there be? Well, the point about charging points is the number grew by 43% last year. To what?
It's increasing every day of the week. It's increasing every day of the week. And there are going to be increasing numbers at motorway service. I don't know the precise number, Camilla. I just said that. It increased by 43% last year. Most people charge at home, and we're going to make sure there are. Well, there are going to be an increasing number as we see an increased number of cars on the roads. Most people charge at home, and that will continue to be the case.
But how many do you think we need to sustain this? How many do you think we need to have? What number would you put on it? You're the Transport Secretary.
Well, It depends on the mix that you have. So, for example, we're seeing an increasing number of fast chargers available. That means you don't need as many of those as you do with slower chargers. The technology is developing all of the time. We've set out rules so that there'll be competitive charging available at motorway service areas, so people will have a choice of charge point operators. We're being clear about transparency on pricing, and the number of charge points is increasing every day. But as I said, most people charge at home, but we're making sure there will be charge points available publicly and at motorway service areas, so people have the confidence they can charge their vehicles wherever they go.
All right, Mark Harper, thank you very much indeed for joining me this morning.
Thank you very much, Camilla.
Thank you, thank you.